Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Narinderpal Singh and I will be the moderator for today's session. We are delighted to have you with us. Let me share a bit about Sikh Research Institute or SikhRI. Over the last 7 years, SikhRI focused on community development through programs such as leadership programs developing visionaries, trained 3,000 worldwide, educational seminars stopping misinformation reached 300,000 globally, K-12 services teaching values and language skills served 41 schools, 500 teachers, and 1,700 students. We ask for your financial support to continue this work. Please donate by visiting us on the web at www.sikhri.org. Your instructor today will be I.J. Singh Ji. Dr. I.J. Singh is Professor Emeritus Basic Sciences at the University of the New York University, and is also a writer and speaker on Sikhs and Sikhism in the diaspora. He was born in India but has spent most of his life in the United States. He has authored 4 collections of essays on his journey as a Sikh in North America. He serves on the boards of Sikh Research Institute, Sikh Review, and United Sikhs. He has lectured extensively on interfaith issues and is a regular columnist on the online magazine sikhchick.com. Next slide. I would like to bring your attention to the Sikh or the Siddhak Leadership Retreat upcoming on 25th June through July 9th this year in San Antonio in Texas. Don't miss out on this excellent program. There are 3 tracks of study or of learning to pursue Sikhi in terms of the historical context, Sikhi 201 for advanced students and adults, and those who have completed Sikhi 101 or Gurmukhi 101. There are divans, leadership sessions, Gatka, open mic night, and much more. It's open to all ages 17 years and older. Please go to the website www.sikhri.org for more detail and information. Let us begin our session today. I would like now to hand it over to Dr. I.J. Singh. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Dr. I.J. Singh Ji, you should have presenter rights now.
What happened here?
We can hear you now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining me today. My only regret is that our system still is an audio system, and I'd like to see your all faces. That is, I'm talking about. You know, I have to start with a bit of an acknowledgement. This is my 4th webinar with SikhRI, and I'm always just as equally lost in the technology of this. I have to thank the staff of the SRI, including Harinder, Jasmine, Inderpreet, and Shraddha, for putting it all together. SP Singh, the technologist based in India, in Punjab, who took my notes of 2 essays on this topic and made that into a handsome PowerPoint presentation. And luckily I have with me, sitting next to me, a computer whiz, Manpreet Singh. Without him I still would not know what I am doing with this computer. And now that you've gone through the commercials, including one on me, let's get started. You know, Liv-Misl America, or Amrika, I should say, that's the way it's spelled here. And this very deliberately provocative title was meant to catch your eye. And it's not really my work. That title comes from Harinder and Inderpreet and Jasmine, I believe. And now that we've caught your eye, let's see what we can do with it. I probably would have picked something a little more benign in the titles. And how do I get to the next? It's not going anywhere. No? There. Over there. See, right in the beginning I got caught with the computer technology. I couldn't move on to the next slide. So I would have picked a more benign title like Back to the Future, Ideas on Self-Governance, or Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow, Rights, Obligations of Citizenship. What I'm talking about is many voices, one nation. And now that you've got your attention, let's move on with it. Okay. You look at the word missiles, and the word, well, these are not the kind of missiles for which you need silos and an arms treaty. This comes to us from Farsi, the Persian language, a unit or brigade of armed Sikh warriors, territory controlled by them from which they exact tribute. The dictionary meaning, there are many, a variety of descriptions, from a tribe or a race or territory occupied by a Sardar and his comrades. Bhute Shah said that, and I like that. Even a thana sometimes has been used as a translation for missile. A garrison, border fortification, J.D. Cunningham. Really, these variety of multitudes of meanings and applications are trying to capture the embryology and the ontogeny of a nation. I got stuck again. It's not. It did, or didn't it? No. Let me go back. How do I go back to this? Previous. Got it. Now, a contemporary of the 10th master of Guru Gobind Singh, Senapati, is said to have used the term missile in his writings, but I have to confess that I do not have exact information and the reference on where he used the term, but largely the term comes to us from post-Guru period of the 18th century. There were the Sikhs at the time organized into 11 groups, or 11 missiles as they were called in the post-Guru period. But the Khalsa in fact was organized as one of two larger groups, the Buddha Dal and the Taruna Dal, that is the groups of the old and the young, and under them were these 11 missiles. The records of the missiles and what they did, and the commanders and what they did, how they maintained their fighting records and forces and territorial acquisitions, were maintained at the Akal Takht. Later, a 12th missile, independent of the Dal Khalsa, arose in the Patiala region. Exactly when they arose, I do not know. Our history is not very clear about it. The Dal Khalsa itself, which meant the combination of the Buddha Dal and the Taruna Dal, the young and the old Khalsa, was a loosely knit confederacy with no written constitution, no controlling legal document. They operated on agreed upon practices and as tradition and new needs guided them. Now, there were a couple of important things they have, important features. One, that every missile chief maintained his autonomy. And two, that any Amritdhari Sikh could join. And three, a member of a missile could even shift his allegiance. I mean, you could move from Malwa to Maja or something and join the missiles that was prevalent there. Now, twice a year, the missiles convened at Vaisakhi and Diwali at the Akal Takht, not the whole missile, but through their leadership, through the leader of the missile. They collected at the Akal Takht. Akal Takht was the symbolic capital of the new nation, and issues that arose and were of common interest could be discussed and policy formulated. Now, much of my information on missiles, where did that come from? From Hari Ram Gupta, a noted historian, from his chapter in the Encyclopedia of Sikhism published by the Punjabi University, edited by Dr. Harbans Singh. Now, the Misl period ended up with the domination of growing dominance, shall I say, of Ranjit Singh, who later came to consolidate his power. He successfully forged a very powerful rule to rule a large swath of North Indian territory extending from Afghanistan and Kashmir. And but what he did was, like all rulers, he did not particularly want a competing source of authority near him, a competing source of power. So he successfully undermined the Misls and successfully liquidated all Misls north of the Satluj River. And that he did. Now, so the neighboring Misls were in fact destroyed, so was the authority of the Akal Takht. As a matter of fact, the last conclave at the Akal Takht of the Misl leaders was in 1805. And this was for the Sarbat Khalsa to consider whether to extend help to the Maratha, the Savantrai Holkar, against his fight, in his fight against the British. And that was the last one that he allowed, Ranjit Singh allowed to be held. And the next conclave did not happen until 1925. Ranjit Singh was replaced by the British in 1849. And of course the British did not want any competing sources of power either. And so next came in 1925, when there were no longer any Misls. Now our next slides are okay. So now we are in the post Ranjit Singh period. Do we want to go back? No, we need to go back. Yeah, that's good. Now the British annexed Punjab in 1849. So forgive me for the confusion we are having moving with this. Probably my computer or my fat fingers. I'm not doing it right. The control of Sikh institutions passed to the British. So the next step occurred in the 1920s, when there was a peaceful struggle launched by the Sikhs to get control of the historic Gurdwaras. There had been enough corruption about in those Gurdwaras, and you know that history. This is not the time to get into that history. So a peaceful struggle was launched in the 1920s. It was a titanic, historic struggle that shook the British Empire to its core. The Sikhs got control of the Gurdwaras in 1925, and even Gandhi, the Mahatma, learned a few lessons about the power of the people. Now, this peaceful struggle won the control of institutions for the Sikhs, but that came with a price. There were laws passed. Under the laws, the SGPC was established, the Shiromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee. Legislative enactment of laws to govern the newly formed SGPC came with it. Later in the 1970s, during Indira Gandhi's time, the Delhi Gurdwara Management Committee also took birth to manage Gurdwaras in Delhi and surrounding regions. And now there may be one in Haryana, perhaps. Time will tell. Now, what's happened then in the time is that the self-governance promised by law for the Sikhs passed to legislatively, politically derived bureaucracy. There are some benefits of it, but more political benefits than religious. Now, it's not doing it. Yeah, it did. No, I think you got to wait. All right. Yeah, that's okay. Now, things have changed. The world now is a global village, which adds considerable complexity and complications to where we are. The past 150 years have seen Sikhs migrating across the world, a substantial number in the Americas, the United States and Canada and so on, in Europe, particularly in Britain, and elsewhere too, in Africa, Kenya and Tanzania and neighboring areas, and other parts of Asia, including Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and so on. The Sikh diaspora, to my mind, is much like that of the Jews. The time scale, of course, is different. The Jews talk of 2,000 years of diaspora, and the Sikhs peak only of 150 odd years. But there are parallels which we'll wait to draw another day. The New World Order has brought Sikhs beyond Punjab and India. Missiles no longer exist to help act in unison for our interest. SGPC is a quasi-deliberative, politically established, legally established body, and its rules of governance, it's a strange animal, and I have to say that. I have to say that because it's a government controlled assembly. Where is it structure discussed? In the Parliament of India or in the Assembly of Punjab? Both are non-religious bodies with very limited representation of Sikhs. So as a representative body of the people of the Sikhs, SGPC is not. And these non-Sikh bodies, the Parliament and Punjab Assembly, decide the rules of the religion and what they will be. That reminds me somewhat of the saying in America when they talk of no taxation without representation. Now the Sikhs now world over are influenced, shaped and exist by the local socio-cultural realities and by the legal ambience wherever they live. And they differ. They're not Punjabi. And the Punjabi institutions are either hostage to local political realities or they are not in tune, not understanding of the needs and circumstances of the diaspora. They get tangled up in the diaspora in our election disputes of whether we're going to sit in tables and chairs or whether marriages are going to be allowed in a rental hall or not. I have to remind you that most of the gurdwaras in this country are a product perhaps of the last 30 to 40 years. There were very few before. When I came here, there was none between New York and California. So where are people going to get married if not in hotel rooms? But our organizations and our institutions get involved in issues of that kind because they know not how the circumstances in the diaspora are. We have to talk about interfaith issues. We have to recognize that much as Hindu influence has changed us in India and in Punjab, the influence around us in this country and this culture is largely Judeo-Christian. So we need to talk to them, we need to understand them. We have several issues of that kind based on the culture and the laws here as well. And you know those things. The Sikhs, are now among many, many nations, many, many countries, many, many cultures. The understanding and interpretation of faith vary. Language is important in that. And the groups tend to grow apart from each other. And that's inevitable. I'll come to that in a moment. And as I said, the dilemma here in the diaspora is the role of the Punjab-based institutions. We are not quite ready, and shouldn't be, to be controlled and guided by a remote bureaucracy where we have no representation. People require equal voice and representation just as in a national legislature. You look at this country and every state promises you 2 senators. The number of representatives can change depending on the size of the population there. But there are 2 senators to speak for the state, equal number of them. Back to no taxation without representation. But let me come to how we have divided and how the divisions into various people, different cultures, different laws, different societies, and how they influence us. Now what have I done? I'm going back. I don't want to go to the big questions. Yeah, I need to go back. Yeah, that's good. Word trends. Now, I guess this computer is acting like I do, not very reliably, but he'll get the job done nevertheless. Now, Christianity, if you look at Christianity, there are over 200, I think about 250 sects and denominations, and some of them don't even recognize the others as Christians, but that's what they are. And I would tell you that Christianity as is practiced in Rome is very different from what is practiced in Latin America or United Kingdom or even in America here or Canada or even in India. Even Islam varies with considerable divergence beyond Sunni and Shia. Islam, as you see in Pakistan, is not the way it is in Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, and not quite the same in America or Canada. I'll illustrate that with Buddhism. Buddhism, in Japan or Tibet, they're worlds apart. But an example closer to home I'll give you of Hinduism. When I look at Hinduism, and when we looked at it in India, the central issues to us, it seems to me that the central values that defined Hinduism and Hindu existence, Hindu practice, were caste, the place of the Brahmin, and the cow, sacred cow. These are the fundamental practices. I look at Hindus here in this country, they have a very large presence here now, growing presence, and they really don't talk of caste. They deny the caste as a hereditary limiting group. They think of it, they speak of it as a social division of a people into higher and lower caste or upper and lower caste or different castes without too much of the value attached to it. The cow, of course, does not enter into the dialogue unless we are talking of how burgers at McDonald's are made. And nobody really talks much about the Brahmin's position that he seems to have inherited. Other major religions of the world are going through similar sects and divisions and so on. And I assure you, same is happening to us and will continue to happen. Wait another 100 years. The language and interpretation are important. As I said, we'll be under the influence of Judeo-Christian interaction here outside India, and India remains closely interacting with perhaps Hindu society, and so they will diverge in their practices, even in their interpretations. What happened here? What have I done here again? I'm not going back. Okay, let's talk of a governing model. A governing model that can connect to our history and that yet give us the room to grow independently in time. Quasi-independent, geographically based, semi-autonomous, and that's what I'm talking about. So I would redefine missiles away from the missiles and silos and restructure worldwide Sikhs into a new collective. Sikhs of different nations to exist as the new missiles that convene as Sarbat Khalsa. Now, that would provide the diaspora Sikhs with equal rights and representation, and that would be a critical step towards self-governance, accountability, and transparency. So I'm talking of Sikh missiles now, not the way they were labeled and named in the 18th century, in the 19th century, but as the missile Amriki or Angrezi or missile Punjabi or missile Pakistani or wherever there is a significant number of Sikhs present. Now, each would then speak for and watch its own self-interest, come from its own perspective, but each would come together, and they would all come together in a Sarbat Khalsa in the larger interest of the Sikhs worldwide. There are many issues that we face, and unless we make a collective, we can't really face them or deal with them very productively. What I'm saying is to you that we need to think globally, act locally, start small. We need to create a collective that's greater than the sum of the parts. I am having this problem. One more. No? Again it's gone. Okay. An international body, an international presence would make it harder for the bureaucracy of any nation to dominate the Sikhs, and the classic example of that is 1984. And what's happening? It's moving by itself. Maybe because you're doing it over there. No? That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. It's okay. That's right. It's harder for the bureaucracy. Leave it. Leave it. Leave it. Leave it. And you know, I give you examples of 1984 of the issue of turban in France, or the issues that our Sikh coalition and SARDF and the United Sikhs deal with here, and the turban in France, and the security that issues at the airports. And we might be able to then address them with an international presence. They might even invigorate the 5 Takhts and help chart new roles for them. At the moment, they're somewhat dysfunctional. They speak on issues that they have so little expertise, and then speak in language and a cultural framework that makes little sense outside where they are. So this will give us a great model for nation building for all times, a space to accommodate new realities, groups, and diversity, and where we can remain steadfast to our unchanging traditions and truths. It would enable Sikhs to legitimately evolve into a nation without borders. And that's how I look at the Sikh reality today, and bring to today's global village greater and richer reality of Sikhi. I have to go here. Yeah. Now there are, leave it, please. Okay. When you look at how the people of the world govern themselves, there are many, many models that would come to mind, and the Arab world is now putting some to the test these days. From monarchy to democracy, we don't need the monarchy and the oligarchies and those sort of things. Democracy holds promise, but we know that democracy is prone to corruption. Except that it is better than the others. What remains to look at are the criteria for membership and leadership in a democratic structure. How should the membership be regulated? When you look at the 18th century Misl, the criteria was very, very simple. They were Amritdhari and they were males. And they could change allegiance at any time. Now, the criteria therefore were direct, simple, apparently easily enforceable, and seemingly they did not intrude into the lifestyle or character traits of the person. And the good moral character of a person was necessary only to look at for a leadership role. What should these things be now? What kind of criteria? How to anoint a leader? By democratic elections or through selection? Now, the first and foremost question then is, who is a Sikh? Oh, man. First and foremost question is, who is a Sikh and how to evaluate his or her character? When I look at it, I see 3 kinds of Sikhs in our world. Nevertheless, they are Sikhs. One, Amritdhari, and many even live and die for their commitment, but not all. Secondly, there are Sikhs who are Sikhs by appearance, and their loyalty perhaps ranges from cultural to very meaningful, deep attachment for Sikhi. Their practice varies. And third are the non-recognizable Sikhs, those who do not wear the markers of the Sikh religion. And they too have all possible gradations of commitment and feeling, from cultural loyalty to deep attachment for Sikh values or practices. Now, for many of them, Sikhism as a marker of identity, as a position of identity, is a default position, and I know that. Yet I would like to leave you with one thought here. In 1699, Vaisakhi, when Guru Gobind Singh created the institution of the Khalsa, history suggests to us that about 80,000 Sikhs attended that conclave. They came. History also suggests to us that about 20,000 became Amritdhari during that time. I don't know what that time frame is, a week or a month, around that time. 20,000 became Amritdhari. The other 60,000 did not at that time, perhaps later, perhaps a month later or 6 months later, or a year later, perhaps never. Yet they remained loyal to Sikhism and to the Guru and to the message. Now the Guru Sikhs had fought most of their battles before 1699, but they did fight 4 battles afterwards. Now I don't think the Guru fought those battles with just those 20,000 who had become Amritdhari. I don't think, there is no evidence that he ever rejected the likes of Bhai Nandlal or Bhai Kanhaiya, who had not become Amritdhari Sikhs. There is no evidence that he ever said to the people, "You are not my Sikhs, get out of my face." He didn't do that. And so we need to answer this question of who is the Sikh, and our success or failure depends on how we respond to this one primal question. Now, oops, it's okay. By the time this gets done, and either I'll be driven crazy or I will have learned how to do this right. He's never given me this problem before. Now, for all institutions that exist, one has to recognize that institutions are the products of the individual ideas of the self. How people look at themselves. When they come to a collective, that is how the collective identity evolves, that is how institutes evolve. So for people of every nation or institution, there are 2 essentials. One is the individual identity, definition and sense of self. And in that there is plenty of flexibility. And let me illustrate that by a non-Sikh example. What Sarah Palin might think is a good American is perhaps very different from what I might think, or even what perhaps Barack Obama might think. Yet they are both Americans. The corporate identity, institutional identity of Barack Obama, as well as of Sarah Palin, as well as of people like me, would be American. And it would be rooted in the law. The corporate or institutional identity comes from the law. Individual identity comes from the self. And the 2 are related. If I were to look at our corporate identity as Sikhs, it then has to be rooted in the Sikh code of conduct. That is the equivalent of the law. Now, a constitution or a code of conduct is open to interpretation and to amendment. Constitutions do get amended. Look at the fact that women did not have the right to vote in 1776. They got that right 150 years later in 1920. Constitutions do get amended. Look at the fact that at one time a black man was considered 3/5 of one person for his rights. And then, of course, for the Civil War, for the battle over racism, you know the battle. The Voting Rights Bill in 1965, Civil War 100 years earlier. So they get interpreted, laws get interpreted and amended, but it's a slow, careful, deliberative process. It cannot be arbitrarily toyed with. You cannot create new things out of the fundamental values. Fundamentals remain sacrosanct. You cannot create Christianity without Jesus at the core. And you cannot take Sikh faith and its markers out of it and yet build a faith that you call Sikhi. Now, Sikh institutions and missals, I would think, ought to be open to Sikhs of all shades, those who call themselves Sikhs, who desire to walk the path. And it should be equally welcoming to women, which was not the case in the 18th century. Now then the question becomes, how do we get the leaders we deserve? Do we select them or elect them? As I said earlier, democratic process of voting plurality is divisive and easily corrupted. In order to win an election, I have to demean my opponent, and that corrupts the atmosphere as well. And so that's perhaps not the way to go. Or combine it with other ways. Look, I'll give you an example of the Roman Catholics' way of elections. There are two issues there, eligibility and procedure. Until 1059, that means about half the period of the Catholic Church's history, until 1059 there was no eligibility criteria. The selection of the Bishop of Rome was by consensus. The criterion was further refined at the Second Council in Lyon, 1274, and that required unanimity. The idea of unanimous elections was entertained and incorporated in 1274. If you move forward a few hundred years, and then we'll look at the many ways to anoint a pope. One was by acclamation and then unanimity. Another way that had been used by the Catholic Church was by conference and compromise. They appointed a committee of 3 or 5 or 7 cardinals whose judgment would be accepted by all, by every cardinal, and therefore unanimity would result from what the committee suggested. They practiced that for a while. Now unanimity has been replaced in June 2007, just a couple of years ago, and the Pope changed it to 2/3 plus 1 majority. So unanimity is no longer the necessity, but 2007 says 2/3 of the majority plus 1. Now, until 1059, as we said, there was no fixed criteria. The Bishop of Rome was elected the way he was. The purpose in my listing those things is what happened? What happened? It moved to, okay. The purpose of my listing these things is to emphasize that governing procedures can evolve and change with new ways of thinking. They are not written in stone. They are not open to arbitrary change, but they can be amended, they can be changed. It's like amending a constitution. Possible, even desirable, but never easy. Now there are a few caveats to what I have just said. It's going back again. It disappeared. I don't know what happened. Oh man. It's now, I don't know what to do with it. Now, I don't know what's happening to this. Believe me when I say that this is the 4th webinar and I've never had these problems. Oops, went out again. What I want to tell you is, let me continue with this, we'll see what to say, that the Guru's teachings of an Amritdhari life must remain central and sacrosanct. Humility, tolerance, and humor are essential for all Amritdharis and wannabes alike. It's important to recognize the failings that all humans have. Those who walk the path half-heartedly need to approach Sikh institutions with an acceptance of the teachings and a balanced sense of their own weakness with no expectation of entitlement. And that is what I see in problems sometimes. We have a sense of entitlement. I am here, I have made a ton of money, and Doesn't matter what I look like or what I do in my private life. You need to make me a trustee or the president of the Gurdwara. To me, Sikhs the world over are like runners in a marathon. I know a marathon is announced today and 1,000 people join, and some will near the end point in a couple of hours, and many will take half a day, and many like me will never get to the end point. Yet we need to recognize that all working in the same direction, on the same path, though at different points on the same path at any given time. Let's continue the discourse and explore how we look at ourselves, what institutions we create to carry us forward. How do we connect our past with the present and take guidance for the futures? I will tell you that ours is a nation without borders, not a corporation. We depend on self-governance, transparency, accountability, not the whim of a CEO, however wise. Look at the people who founded Liv-Misl. They had a genius for administrative organization that we seem to have lost despite the plethora of MBAs amongst us. How to guard our institutions, how to develop them further. I am not given a formula etched in stone, and I will say to you, the things we have talked about, you could dismiss them by saying that we have been talking and thinking similarly for over 100 years, so what else is new? For me too, this is the second webinar on the issue of Sikh institutions and several essays. I would ask you, I will give you the question, are we on our 100th year of conversation on these matters, or are we still on the first year for the 100th time? Now let's talk about some questions, and in spite of the issues with our computer, questions and comments, and more comments than questions, I hope answers will come, but slowly. I thank you. How do I change this?
Hanji, Uncle Ji, thanks very much for the presentation and an opportunity for the audience to ask the questions. One of the questions that have come in is what was the basis for these missiles? Was it by caste or was it geographic region? How did these come about? This is by Herleen Kaur.
Well, you know, whether you're talking of territories within a country, or whether you're talking on a smaller scale of families in a village or a neighborhood, or whether you're talking of countries that come together for a world organization, ultimately you need to have collective goals, societies that we evolve from the smaller to the larger. Human beings are too weak to exist individually very much. They can't survive too well without a societal framework to support them. So this is part of that. I would imagine the earliest societies then are neighborhoods and communities. So I would imagine the beginning was geographic. And of course when Ranjit Singh concentrated his control to beyond the local geography, then he had no need for missiles, and the missiles suffered. I don't know whether that answered the question that you have, but it talks about it.
Well, thank you, Uncle Jay. I'll let Herleen Kaur give us some feedback if she needs further clarification. But she's also asking, Guru Nanak Sahib Ji traveled through Judeo-Christian societies. Were his ideas also affected by these societies, just like ours are being affected here in North America?
You know, Guru Nanak traveled all over. The Judaic society or thought came to us through Islam. You know, Judaism has two children. Judaism has Christianity and Islam. So these three are fundamentally the kernel of the Judeo-Christian thinking. So Islam came to us through that. And if you look at even the Guru Granth, you will find plenty of references to Islamic teaching, their beliefs, the way they do things. In fact, there are a series of shabads addressed to Muslims how to be a good Muslim, or what are the criteria of Islam. And of course, the larger Hindu influence was there. I don't mean by influence that they modified the ideas of Guru Nanak. That's not what I'm saying. Guru Nanak's ideas were original, and it was not a derivation of the other two around him. That's not the point. But you live in the culture in which you teach, and you teach in the language, the cultural context. Otherwise, your teaching fails. And that is what Guru Nanak did within the Hindu and Islamic cultural context. Because those are the practices the people came with. And our people too, here, will talk to people who have Judeo-Christian practices outside India, and who will perhaps be influenced by what they hear, what they see in churches and synagogues and friends. Ultimately, the biggest influence on us is that of our peers and friends and neighbors. Right? And that's the influence. That is how our thinking gets cast in that language and that cultural framework. That is why we speak in English the way we do today.
Thank you, Uncle Ji. Thank you, Uncle Ji. There is one person in the audience, Amrita Singh Ji, who would like to ask you a question yourself. I'm going to unmute him now so that he can sort of ask the question himself here in a second.
Hello, can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Sardar Sahab, मेरा तो एक क्वेश्चन है, but मैं पंजाबी पूछूंगा. ते मैनू जे मैं गलत क्वेश्चन पूछ रहा हूँ या मेरा जे मैनू प्रभाव गलत मिला होगा तो तुसी मैनू प्लीज ठीक कर दियो. मैनू ये लग्या कि तुसी जिहड़ी प्रेजेंटेशन विच एक सवाल आया सीगा कि सिख किदां दा होना चाहिदा, ओदी डेफिनेशन, मैं लफ्ज डेफिनेशन वरत रहा जी. ਇਹ ਠੀਕ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ ਜਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਡਿਫਾਈਨ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਫਿਊਚਰ ਜਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਿੱਖ ਦੀ ਡੈਫੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਕੀ ਹੋਏਗੀ?
ਦੇਖੋ, ਜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਿੱਖ ਗਿਣਨੇ ਆ, ਜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੋਈ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ ਬਣਾਉਣੀ ਹੈ, let me go back to English if you don't mind. ਠੀਕ ਹੈ, ਮੈਂ ਮਿਕਸ ਕਰ ਦਿਆਂ ਲੈਂਗੁਏਜ?
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਕਰ ਦਿਓ.
Okay. If we're going to make an organization, we're going to have to count Sikhs. If you're going to count Sikhs, then we need to know who they are. In this country, you know, look at it this way. In this country, we count Americans. How do we determine who's an American? By law. I'm a naturalized citizen. I have the right to. I could be an alien, legal alien, and pay all the taxes, be subject to all the laws of the country, but have no right to vote. Right? I become a citizen. I am recognized by law. And even there, I have equal rights in just about everything except one or two, the right to join the army if you are fighting. But the other one which remains is that I can't run for president. Not that I want to, but the point is legally we cannot do that. Did you ever think why? And I don't have an answer to that. But I would say to you, is that creating two levels of citizenship? Those that can be president and those that cannot be legally president. I can get elected to a governorship. The guy at California, who was the governor in California just now? What was his name? Manpreet? Yeah, Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was born in Austria. He could become the governor of California, the biggest state in the country, but he cannot become the president of the country. Now, I think sometimes this inequality can be tolerated, and I can live with it. Why? Because you see, when you become an American, when you come here, it is a way of life that should inform you. And that way of life, which is very different from the way of life which you may have come from. And a way of life does not become part of it. The biggest change that we go through as Americans is not an external change, but an internal change. You don't become an American just by changing your hairstyle or clothes or even language or getting accent lessons to clear out your accent. There is a way of thinking the values, how you treat people, how you look at change, how you look at society, how you look at rights of the government and the rights of the people. And that internal change takes time. And the assumption here is that the internal change necessary to become the head of the country perhaps takes a lifetime, free of the influence of the others, quite so. So in a sense we have created different levels of citizenship, and we have created different levels in a sense of Sikh. I would consider a Sikh anybody who claims to be a Sikh for voting purposes and so on, and even in the Gurdwara for equal rights. But I would not give the presidency of the Gurdwara or the management of the Gurdwara, the public face of Sikhism. I would not appoint a person who does not look like one. Why? Because that has ramifications for the community as a whole. And then you got me on my soapbox, and I can talk about that for hours. So the issue is not always so clearly, so easily resolved. It depends on the circumstances. If I'm going to represent Sikhs and become the public face of SikhRI at hearings for Sikh rights and privileges and things of that nature, for equal place at the table for Sikhs, then I've got to make sure that the person who goes there to represent us looks like it. When I'm going to be counting heads in the Gurdwara, well, I'll count the wannabes in there too. They are on the same path, not at the same place at the same time.
Thank you, Uncle Ji. Amritpal Singh ji, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਅਗਲਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਸੀ ਇੱਕ ਹੋਰ?
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਸਰਦਾਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ, ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਪੁੱਛਣ ਦਾ ਬੇਸ ਸੀਗਾ ਉਹ ਇਸ ਲਈ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟ ਸਿੱਖਸ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਦੱਸੀ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲਾਅ ਦੇ ਐਂਗਲ ਤੋਂ ਦੱਸੀ, ਤੇ ਉਹਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਲਾਅ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰਿਜ਼ਮ ਦੇ ਥਰੂ ਇੰਟਰਪ੍ਰੀਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਲਾਅ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਆ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਤਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਹੈਂਡਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਵੀ ਲਾਅ ਦੇ ਨੁਕਤੇ ਤੋਂ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਦੀ ਇੰਟਰਪ੍ਰੀਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਕਰਨੀ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਕੋਈ ਬਹੁਤੀ ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਵਾਲੀ ਗੱਲ ਤੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ, ਬਟ ਹਾਲਾ ਮੇਰੀ ਪੜ੍ਹਾਈ ਲਿਖਾਈ 'ਚ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਕਮੀ ਹੈ, ਮੈਂ ਕੋਈ ਸਟੇਟਮੈਂਟ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਦੇ ਸਕਦਾ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ। ਪਰ ਦੂਸਰੀ ਚੀਜ਼, ਜੇ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਨੂੰ ਡਿਫਾਈਨ ਕਰਤਾ, ਮੈਂ ਫਿਰ ਲਫ਼ਜ਼ ਡਿਫਾਈਨ ਕਰਤਾ ਜਾਂ ਉਹਦੀ ਪਰਿਭਾਸ਼ਾ ਦੇ ਦਿੱਤੀ, ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਅਧਿਆਤਮਿਕ ਜਗਤ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਵਾਪਰ ਜਾਣਗੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਨ ਟਿਊਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਣਗੀਆਂ। ਫੋਰ ਐਗਜ਼ਾਮਪਲ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਦਾ ਵਰਤਾਰਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਵਰਲਡ ਵਾਈਡ ਆ, ਉਹ ਗਲੋਬਲ ਆ, ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਪਰਟੀਕੂਲਰ ਫੇਥ ਦੇ ਬੰਦਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਨਾ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਵੀ ਉਹਦੀ ਤੋਰ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਵੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀ ਆ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਉਹਨੇ ਲਫ਼ਜ਼ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਨਾ ਸੁਣਿਆ ਹੋਵੇ। ਸਿੱਖੀ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੀ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬਿਲੀਵ ਕਰਦੀ ਆ, ਤੇ ਜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਦੀ ਡੈਫੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਦਿੱਤੀ, ਡੈਫੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਹਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਅਸੀਂ ਬਾਉਂਡਰੀ ਕੰਡੀਸ਼ਨ ਬਣਾ ਦੇਵਾਂਗੇ, ਤੇ ਜੇ ਬਾਉਂਡਰੀ ਕੰਡੀਸ਼ਨ ਬਣਾ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਸਿੱਖ ਉਸ ਬਾਉਂਡਰੀ ਕੰਡੀਸ਼ਨ 'ਚ ਰਹੇਗਾ, ਉਹ ਬਾਹਰਲਿਆਂ ਵਰਤਾਰਿਆਂ 'ਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਏਗਾ। ਪਰ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਗੱਲ ਵੀ ਸਮਝਦਾ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਲੋਕਲ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਹੈ ਨੇ ਕੰਟਰੀਜ਼ ਦੀਆਂ, ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ 'ਚ ਰਹਿਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ, ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਸੋਲਵ ਕਰੀਏ, ਉਹਦਾ ਜਵਾਬ ਤਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਮੇਰੇ ਕੋਲ ਹੈ, ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਲੋਕ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੇ ਸਕਣ। ਬਟ ਫਿਰ ਜੇ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਦੀ ਡੈਫੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਗਈ, ਫਿਰ ਸਿੱਖ ਇੱਕ ਘੇਰੇ 'ਚ ਹੀ ਰਹਿ ਜਾਏਗਾ। ਸਿੱਖ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵਰਲਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਸਰਬੱਤ ਦਾ ਭਲਾ, ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਕੱਲੇ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਤਾਂ ਹੈ ਨਹੀਂ, ਇਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਨੇ ਹੁਣ। ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਹਾਂਜੀ
ਗੱਲ ਸੁਣੋ, ਮੈਂ ਇਹ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿਹਾ, ਇਸ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਕਹਿ ਰਿਹਾ ਨਾ ਕਿ ਸਿੱਖ ਸਾਰੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਧਾਰੀ ਵੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਕੇਸ਼ਾਧਾਰੀ ਵੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਨੇ, ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੇ ਨਜ਼ਰ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਸਾਨੂੰ, ਉਹ ਵੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਨੇ ਜੋ ਉਸ ਰਾਹ ਤੇ ਤੁਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ। ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੱਢਿਆ ਨਹੀਂ, ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਨਕਲੂਡ ਕਰੋ। ਮੈਂ ਉਸ ਤਰਫ ਉਹ ਗੱਲ ਅੱਗੇ ਹੋਰ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਰੈਪਰਜ਼ੈਂਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ, ਤੇ ਪਬਲਿਕ ਫੇਸ ਵੀ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਦਾ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ, ਉੱਥੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਥੋੜਾ ਸੋਚਣਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਵਾਸਤੇ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹਦੀਆਂ ਰੈਪਰਕਸ਼ਨਸ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ they are important. Let me illustrate that by an example, a real example that happened here in 1970s ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ। ਇੱਥੇ ਕਾਫੀ ਸਾਰੇ lot of engineers came to this country, Sikh engineers from Punjab, and jobs were tight. They applied for they didn't have licenses here to practice engineering. They applied for jobs as technicians for the New York Telephone Company. They passed the exam. There were a couple of people. They did very well. And the phone company said to them, New York phone company said to them, you may come Monday, join the job, but you can't come with this turban on your head. You know, this beards and turbans are not allowed. That's against policy, the company policy. Of course, they protested that, And the Indian Consulate General was asked, and the consulate people said, well, Sikhs are people who traditionally wear turbans and long hairs. For further information, talk to the Sikh Cultural Society. Now, Sikh Cultural Society was at that time getting a new Gurdwara, and of course they were not equipped to handle such issues. They hadn't thought about these matters very much, and they didn't know what to do with it. They sat on the letter for a while. We found the letter, and we went to the hearings, forced some hearings, and we won the case ultimately. But the funny part was that the people who went to speak, I was one of them, so I know from first-hand information. There were 4 Sikh guys, recognizable Sikhs, Keshatari Sikhs. Whether anybody was Amritari or not, I won't even say, I don't know. And 1 woman in there. We took one along to make a statement. The lawyers of the phone company were very well educated about it. And the lawyer said to us, either of you, what office do you hold in the Gurdwara, in your temple? What office do you hold? None of us held any office. So he says to us, where is your president? Why isn't he here? Where is your secretary? Why isn't he here? And the reason was very simple. The president and secretary were not recognizable Sikhs. They were Sikh, but not recognizable ones. Okay, unfortunately. So his answer was very simple after that. The lawyer says it's not important enough for your leaders of your community. It's not important enough for you. We won the case with great difficulty. After that, the Gurdwara changed its rules to make mandatory for management to be recognizable, and later Amrita. And I would say, I would not mind non-Keshatari Sikhs in Gurdwaras. I would give them an equal place in everything, except I would not make them president. No, and I would not give them the offices that are the public face. Much as in this country, I cannot become the president. I am an equal citizen. The same miseries and the same pleasures that everybody else has.
Thank you, Uncle.
So SikhRI remains all-inclusive in my mind. Okay? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Uncle Ji, very much. I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention, we have 4 minutes left and there are many questions coming in. And I would like very much to ask Sharandeep Singh's question next. He's saying, what thought has been given to the realistic implementation of a 21st century missile system, and how do we work within the current framework, or do you regard the current framework to be completely inflexible? And he's saying that, to come to Harleen's point, influence of the Christian and other religions, and if we assume that Guru Nanak Sahib and his teaching was able to be influenced, we cast into doubt his direct link with Waheguru and the fact that his, yeah. So he's,
I did not say that Guru Nanak changed his message. I didn't say that because of the influence of the Hindus and Muslims around. Guru Nanak was speaking in the cultural context and framework of India. And he did. So he had to relate the message to what was going on around him, Hindu practices and Islamic practices. And he had to be knowledgeable about them. And I'm saying to you, we will refer to Guru Nanak's message, but we'll apply it here. In order to apply it here, we need to understand our neighbors as well. We need to listen to them. We need to speak to them. And that's what we will do. I have not pointed out anywhere Guru Nanak's weakness. I thought I answered that, I thought reasonably forthrightly, perhaps not.
Yeah. So there was a part of this question is very interesting. A general question, I guess, would be, in terms of a 21st century missile system,
Let me come to that.
Yes,
Let me come to that.
Yeah.
Now, you see, I am suggesting to you, and I've been talking about it before. I've been suggesting to you that, and others, that we are now all over the world. We need local organizations that are semi-autonomous, like an all-American Sikh movement, whatever you want to call it. If you don't want to call it a missile, call it something else. Like states that came together to form a nation. And I'm saying it internationally too. We have to speak the language of the culture in which we exist. We have to relate to those things, and we need to create a whole that is greater than the sum of the parts. Now, in that I see representation of the American Sikhs. I see representation of the Sikhs from Kenya, representation from Thailand, and representation from India as well. Of course, India will have the largest population and therefore perhaps have a larger voice. Punjab would have a larger voice, I imagine, but not a controlling voice. They should not have that. And I would like to see the Jathedars operate as a Supreme Court of the Sikhs, and I can talk for hours about that, but another day. In fact, I did a few months ago, I think. But to do that, we need to think beyond the borders of Punjab. We need to look at a global reality. We need to give them representation, an equal place at the table. Okay? So that for the larger Sikh reality, we could work. Now, for the Misl structure, I borrowed the Misl idea from our history, and I wrote a couple of essays, and SikhRI approached and said, why don't we do a webinar on it? And we tried to do that, and my computer screwed up everything, but that's all right.
Well, Uncle Ji, thank you so much indeed. You've put this idea of missiles up front in terms of...
Can I say one more sentence?
Yes, please.
One more sentence?
Yes.
How to do it? Well, you know, you can't see me there, luckily for you. I'm a graybeard. So my work in the world my generation's work is almost done. It's for you, young people out there, to listen to what I just said, to modify it, either throw it out with the bathwater, or change it, or design something that will be more inclusive and yet be true to our faith, and create that reality. So the 21st century work is set for you.
Well, thank you so much again, Uncle Ji, for inspirational words and for a context in terms of the historical context of the missiles for us as a sort of perhaps as a framework for something that we could do in this century, as one of the attendees here talks about creating a cyber and a virtual Sangat, and uses the analogy of what happened in Egypt in terms of the power of the cyber, of it potentially as a cyber Sangat. So we thank you very much for an excellent presentation and for your time to speak to us. I would like to remind the audience that of the SIDC program that's coming up in June. Please go to the SikhRI website to check it out. Also would like to apologize for the technical difficulties that we've had. We've got some feedback also from the audience in terms of how we can extend the Q&A session in future because clearly these are engaging discussions and can't be just done in an hour and a half. So thanks to everyone for joining in today. Hope to see you all soon next time. And thank you again to Dr. I.J. Singh. I pass this back to Jasdeep Singh for his to wrap up the session and for his parting comments.
And I thank you all. I thank you all.
Thank you, Uncle Ji. Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa.
Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh.
Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Fateh, everybody. As Narendrapal Singh Ji mentioned, I do apologize for the technical difficulties. We're actually working quite diligently to make sure that these problems don't happen again. Whether it's the slide changing or us being on time to make sure these future webinars are indeed started at the right time, so at least we don't take time away from the question and answer session, which is extremely important. Anyway, I think this is the end of the presentation. Once again, I would like to thank everybody else, and including the audience, everybody who got involved, the people who asked questions, and as well as the presenters. I would go ahead and take a moment to tell you that there's going to be a feedback form that should launch as soon as I end the presentation. Please do take a moment to fill that out. Those comments are extremely valuable for us and help us make our future presentations more beneficial for you guys. So thank you again for joining us, and please fill out the presentation form on the feedback form. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Shall we